Hello, and welcome to another episode of Open Studio. I'm your host, Martina Flor, and in this show, I feature a conversation that I had a few weeks ago on the Pencil Pushers podcast with Mike Rosado. As you may have noticed by now, I like featuring accomplished artists on this podcast to unveil strategies that could help you unlock your creative potential and make a living with your skills. Now, I'm sharing this episode because it unveils my own path as a lettering artist, how I left everything behind and moved from South America to Europe and pivoted careers, the steps I took to start my lettering studio and get my first clients, the skills that I had to acquire to make it as an artist, build a team, and land dream assignments, including insights on how I navigated the COVID-19 pandemic to shape a new vision for my business that now propels other lettering artists and illustrators forward. Perhaps you have been listening to previous episodes or you are new to the show and you wonder who the heck I am. And I think that this episode makes a great introduction and shows you that I'm an artist like you and that I've been there going through the same challenges that you're experiencing right now. If anything, I hope that this episode will show you what's possible for you as an artist and will provide you with some insights and tactics that you can use to shape your own path. I want to thank the Pencil Pushers podcast again for letting me share this episode. You can find their show on all podcast platforms under the Pencil Pushers podcast and on Instagram at the Pencil Pushers podcast. I will add a link to the show notes so that you can find them and explore the great content that they are putting out there. Now, enjoy this episode with host Mike Rosado and yours truly. We continue doing client work as well. This new direction that the studio has taken is so fulfilling. It makes me so happy. It allows me to work with a team and to hire other people, and it really creates an impact in my students. So that's a win-win situation for everyone.
Recorded at the Kitchen Studios. This is the Pencil Pushers Podcast.
Welcome, Leadheads, to another fine episode of the Pencil Pushers Podcast. I'm, as always, your humble host, Mike Rosado. Today, I'm thrilled to be sharing a very special chat with lettering artist, educator, and leader of our very own studio, the wonderful Martina Flor. We went through a whirlwind of topics that start with the courageous pivot of her leaving her comfy job in Buenos Aires as a graphic designer to train as a lettering artist in Berlin, Germany, into discussions about why this is the best time in history to be a creative, how to position yourself for high-profile client projects, how to even do so as introverted independent creatives, and her thriving academy she created for lettering and illustration students. This talk was so much fun, filled with all kinds of inspiring takeaways, and man, I just can't wait for you to dive in. So let's not waste any more time. Sit back, relax, and enjoy our chat with Martina. We are live with Martina Flor. How are you?
Hi, Mike.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
I know. I'm really excited to have you. It's certainly a little bit of a time jump. You're, I think, in the evening, right? You're in Berlin, right? It's 10 a.m. over here, Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. here.
Yeah, okay. Not too bad.
Entering the evening.
Yeah, not too bad. For the listeners out there, Martina is a lettering designer. She's a lettering artist. She's also an educator. She's got her academy that she's very excited about to share her knowledge and her experience and have new budding lettering artists emerge from the scene, which will be really cool. She's also an author. She's a podcaster. She's got a great podcast. What is the name of your podcast? I actually don't have it written here.
It's Martina Flor's Open Studio.
Okay, killer. Designer, illustrator, teacher, author. So she runs the gamut. She is what I would say is a very modern creative of the day. I mean, this is something we were just talking about before we started pressing record, is what an age that we're living in right now, where we can actually have our hands in so many different avenues to create, to share, to communicate, to gather, etc. I mean, what do you think about that? It's pretty cool time to be alive if you're creative, huh?
Absolutely. I usually talk about this to other creatives I work with, because there's never been a better time to be an artist and a creative, and there's never been a better time to make a living from it, right? Nowadays you can make so many things with your skills. You can teach to other people, you can run a podcast and monetize it, you can, create illustrations for clients, you can do a number of things. And I think it's also great from our times that, the power to explore different avenues is in our hands. Everything is so accessible.
Yes.
And for a creative mind or a creative profile is like the dream life. You can try a lot of different stuff. You can, use your curiosity to take you in different directions. And as I said before, I do that often, but at the same time, from time to time, I stop to think and reflect about, what do I want to continue doing, right? What are the things that really mean something to me? Beyond exploring and trying out new things and new creative avenues, at some point you need to stop and say, like, hey, what makes sense? What
with your time?
Which are the avenues?
With your time,
exactly, and
right.
which are the avenues that bring the more impact, the more joy?
Yeah, it's a huge thing. Yeah, absolutely. So Berlin, I've always, I have a friend who lives in Berlin. She's a photographer. We went to school together in Savannah, Georgia, and I love her dearly. Shout out to Adela. And Berlin, to me, feels like it's an extremely creative city. What is it like living there? What's it like being a creative in such a creative city? And obviously, you're not from Germany, right? You're from South America, I believe, right? Am I wrong? Or okay,
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I moved here 12 years ago.
My dream city, by the way. I'm dying to go visit. I'm dying to go there. Yeah. We'll have to chat about it some other time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I moved here 12 years ago, and I built my life and my business and everything here. And I just love the city because it was the place where I decided to, I was intentional in which direction I wanted to take my career, who I wanted to be my friends, which kind of family I wanted to build. I think for many of us who have relocated cities, I think that there's a lot of challenges in that, in just moving countries. I moved to a totally different country. I didn't know the language. I didn't have any friends or contacts, and I think there's a lot of challenges in doing that, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity. There's the opportunity for you to start over and to create a circle of people around you that really help you achieve your goals, and also set yourself new goals. So, yes, answering to your question,
but
I love Berlin.
But I'm just curious now that you said that. What was it that you weren't necessarily getting in Buenos Aires, but number one, and number two, what was it about Berlin that got you so excited?
Good follow-up question. I think that when I moved to Berlin, I was ready to pivot careers. So I'm originally a graphic designer, and I worked for many years as a graphic designer and an art director. I, pretty early in my life, I went up the ladder of graphic design. So when I turned 27, I was a creative director, directing a team at an agency. And at some point I said, I thought that this was not something that brought me joy. And I actually believed that I would just quit and do something else. And at that moment,
like
I decided to go abroad.
Even out of the creative field.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I was doing illustration on the side, so I thought, like, there should be something better for me out there that has to do with creativity, that is not necessarily doing graphic design at that time I was actually managing a team. I was more in my email software than in my Illustrator app, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Adobe Illustrator app. So I decided to double down on some talent that I had around illustration and letter drawing, and I moved abroad that was the first thing or big thing that I did, that I moved abroad and I signed up for a type design master course, like a 1-year master course in the Netherlands. So it was a really long shot. I just moved countries. I invested all my savings in this experience, and I said like, hey, let's find out if there's something here for me. And that experience was really a tipping point in my life. After that, I said like, hey, I need to, I want to go down this path. I don't know exactly how it looks like, the path that I'm going down. But yeah. And after that experience, I moved to Berlin because I felt that it was a place, Berlin is I think it's one of the
super edgy.
The cities with, yes, but also it's one of the cities with the biggest number of type designers.
Oh, really?
So I moved here. Yeah. I think there's around 50, at the time there were around 50 type designers living and working in the city. So that's a bunch of people for the type design world.
Yeah.
And I moved to Berlin to look for this environment that will just keep me accountable and also show me ways in which I could, with my love for typography and letter drawing, I could make a living and, start a new direction in my career. So I don't know if I answer your question there, but yes, I felt that Berlin had something for me in terms of, the environment, the community. And of course, there's nothing wrong with the people I was surrounded with in Argentina. There's nothing, I appreciate.
I'm sure they were like, is this something we said, Martina? What's going on here?
But I think it has to do with, changing your context, or changing the context also creates or inspires change within you. And I think that's what I needed in my life. I needed a bigger change that had to do not only with what I was doing, but also with everything, like with
because there's a couple of things that I just keep popping in my head. Firstly, you're Latin. My family's from Puerto Rico. I know that if I were to just say I was going across, to a completely different continent, they would freak out. My mom would freak out.
Oh, yeah.
But so number one, I think it's incredibly bold and brave. That's a brave move you did. But not only now, it would have been easy if you had said, "Well, I'll go to Spain." I'll go to Spain. Yeah, I speak Spanish. I'm going to Europe. Okay, that's cool. But then you moved to Germany. So you were so number one, you left your career. You were an illustrator. I'm still trying to figure out how you got into lettering design in particular, what the love of that. But you moved there in a highly competitive space, and you said, "No, I'm going to be where all the top lettering designers are." Because you could have been a big fish in a small pond. So you did a lot of really, really bold moves. That's impressive. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think perhaps the biggest or the smartest decision there was to put myself inside a community that was really thriving for excellence in the discipline I wanted to work within, right? So I wanted to work within the letter design discipline. At that time, over 10 years ago, lettering was not a thing. It was there wasn't even like a name for it, or it wasn't even a niche. So I was also trying to figure out what I wanted to do within the letter design industry, because either you will be a type designer or, there was no point in between. So I think one of the most clever things that I did in that time, without realizing now, is something that I encourage every illustrator artist that I work with. I tell them, like, go and find a community that is really encouraging you to strive for excellence, or for getting really good at what you do. Because the community of type designers that I was in were really renowned type designers. So everything that I was producing, I felt that had to be at that level. And I felt also that they were keeping me accountable in terms of like, I felt that they were looking at what I was doing, right? I was the new girl coming from South America with these colorful drawings with letters, they were a bit curious about it, but also like, doubtful about it. So that really kept me accountable to do my thing and at the same time do it well. And
And were there ever any moments of self-doubt while you were going through that? Because you're basically, again, you're going amongst these really well-established people in a foreign country to you, diving into this new industry, a newbie.
Yeah.
Were you intimidated by that?
Absolutely. Every time. And I still continue to be intimidated by things. And I think this happens to every one of us. The question is whether that's going to stop you from doing it anyways. And I think this is something that I train myself to do. That is like, if there's something that I feel fear around, I would just, try to do it consistently so that the fear goes away. And I remember, for instance, one example of that is that I remember that I was invited to my first talk to my second talk in Berlin. The first one I was invited to do was at Creative Mornings, which was a more or less international event, and I could do it in English. So I felt, okay.
Yeah, they have them here too.
First speaking. Yeah, so it's my first speaking engagement. I can do it in English. It's fine. I will do it, and it went fine. But I think my second or third speaking engagement was a primarily a German speaking event, and they actually offered me to do it in English, but I said like, no, I will do it in German. And I trained myself to just do it in German. And I remember
how was your German like before you moved to Germany? Non-existent?
Zero.
Oh my God.
No. I literally didn't know.
You're my new hero, but go on. Keep going. You're my new hero, but keep going. Yes, keep going.
No, I'm no one's hero, but I think, it's like, I think it has a lot to do with that, which, with that thing of like, even if you're afraid of something or something makes you uncomfortable, it's not enough reason for you not to do it, right? So, I had this this opportunity to speak in front of an audience, a type design related audience, and potential clients there, and I did it in German, and I was super nervous and I was really shaking before I went on stage, but it was after that first one, everything became easier. So I always think of that myself. After the first one, it's gonna be easier for me, and this is what I'm aiming for whenever I do something that I'm really afraid of or I'm insecure about.
Yeah, it's sort of a running theme that I've met with a lot of conversations I've had with people on the podcast is this idea of being afraid a lot of times, these big challenges and stuff, but at the same time, the reward is going to be greater than the risk. Because at the very end of the day, I mean, it is about, learning and reflecting and using that data to now see what can I do better next time. But then you've also, on top of that, you've got this power that's on top of you because you accomplished that first step, right? And a lot of times that's the most difficult thing, is taking that first step,
Yeah, and I think also you can totally relate to this. Like, if you're assigned or if you're commissioned to do a branding project nowadays, after doing, dozens of branding projects, you're in a different position right now, right? You're confident, you can do it. You don't shake whenever you're gonna meet a client that is gonna assign you with a branding project, right? Yeah. But for instance, to start a podcast is something perhaps, well, not now, but it's something that was new for you, 2 years ago or 3 years ago when you started this podcast, right?
Yeah.
So there's always new challenges coming in. I think the key is always like to make that first step and just to build on that experience so that after a few experiences, you have confidence and you can really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because the first times are not entirely enjoyable, right?
Yeah. It's actually cool, I think, and I am sure in the, 15 minutes that we have been speaking together, that I have a feeling that you see these challenges as now almost like exciting moments because you've had the experience of trying them before. So you know you're going to be learning something new about yourself, and you know that you're going to be growing a little bit more. And that's a really, I find it to be, it's both a humbling and also empowering place to be, I would say, because when I say humbling, I mean it's because you're becoming subservient to the challenge ahead, and you're not letting your kind of ego get in the way, which can block you from sort of being free and open to the possibility of, the best part of the experience that you're taking on. Yeah. But then the empowerment part of just knowing that now it's almost like a sense of play because I'm going to learn something here. This will be cool. It's a challenge, and so it's like you get your muscles worked in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, you get used to the idea of like, if there's a challenge, there's probably something for me on the other side, right? Yeah. And and not let the challenge just stop you from discovering what's on the other side. Right?
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about so you get to Berlin, and now you're. It seems like you're perhaps maybe more in learning mode heavily at this point. What was the intent that you were trying to open up a studio, or were you like, oh, maybe I should try and pair up with some of these other top designers and maybe work under their wing? I mean, what was your thought? Did you have a vision for what your 5-year goal was, as an example?
When I started my design studio?
Yeah, sure. Or just like, when you first got to Berlin, I mean, what was the goal for you?
Yeah. So when I first got to Berlin, I just wanted to understand how it looked like to work in the type design industry or in the letter design industry. So the first thing I did was to find an internship on a type foundry here in Berlin. It's called Lucas Fonts, and it's one of the most renowned type designers worldwide. And I had like a 1-year internship in his studio. And that was a really interesting experience just because it allowed me to explore or understand how a type foundry worked and what kind of projects they did. And it was also very interesting for me to understand that this was not what I wanted to do. So after this experience or during this experience, I was also doing my own, running my own workshops, doing my own side projects.
You're being very active here still, yeah.
Exactly. So I was kind of developing my own vision of what I wanted to do. While this experience was really nurturing and really important to me, I still kept exploring. And after that experience, I just started my studio in lettering design. So after I stopped working for the studio, I just started my studio. I designed my website. I just filled it with, I put all the old projects down and I put all my lettering work up and I printed my business cards. Yeah. Beautifully done on letterpress.
Nice.
and I just went out there to say like, hey, hi, I'm a lettering designer.
Yeah. Now, really quick before you continue on there, because I still want to hear the rest of this journey here. But, I think that a lot of people assume that a lettering designer is designing fonts that you tap on the keyboard and it emerges, but there is a difference a lot of times, and sometimes they certainly intersect. But can you tell people a little bit about what the difference really is there?
Yes. So I also design fonts within my business. We also design custom fonts for our clients, but basically the difference between lettering and type design is that lettering is a unique typographic unit. It's just a name or a couple of words.
Singular.
It's a design that is a singular design that is thought for a certain application, for a logotype, for a packaging, for a book cover. Now, a font, on the other side, is a system of interchangeable modules where all combinations work. So you create an alphabet, and any ways you combine
uppercase,
those letters,
lowercase, italicized.
exactly, it all works together, right? It's a system of modules where all combinations work, right? And the I think the most differential part of lettering is that it's a unique design piece, whereas a font can be used for several purposes and several people and several designers in several projects, right? So,
So in that instance, are you? They say so. You do create fonts and sell them online, I would imagine, or
we have created a couple of fonts for different type foundries. But essentially, in the last years, we have just created custom fonts for specific projects, which require some sort of lettering input, and then they needed to expand into a bigger project. So, for instance, last year or 2 years ago, we designed a custom font for a cosmetic brand from. I forgot her name. From a very well-known U.S. Singer. I forgot her name, but it's gonna come back.
Okay.
It's on my website, anyways. But she launched a cosmetic brand, and we designed a font that could be used on all over the place, like all over. On packaging,
Sure.
on advertising. So it had a lettering feel to it, but at the same time, it was a font that, some designer or all the designers that were working in the project could take and just use and create all the applications they needed to create.
Yeah, it feels to me like lettering design, if I were to choose between the two, for me, lettering design would be the way I would want to go, because the tediousness of what's necessary, and it's not to say that it can't get tedious doing lettering design, for sure. Surely many of the work that you've done is very intricate, very precise. But when it comes to creating a system in which everything works throughout the entire alphabet, including potentially even numbers too, I don't think it's necessarily the case, right? But it should. It just seems like that would be a very, very unique challenge. And are you heavily involved in that, or do you have other people that you're working with to, like, for example, are you the one kind of helping design the main aesthetic of it, and then do you have somebody who sort of takes that reign, builds off of it, and then creates a full system for that? Is that sort of how it would work, or how?
Exactly. Yes, I think. Nowadays I don't do the font. I don't expand the font myself, perhaps, and I don't do the font production. I would just have more of a role of art direction and initial concept creation, but then the expansion and the technical side of it perhaps is taken over by someone in my team.
Yeah, gotcha.
For sure.
So going back to your studio, and related to that, so you did this one project for a pop star of some sort, right? That who we'll insert later somehow.
It's gonna come out.
Now, I'm very curious how this started 12 years ago. Is that right?
Yes.
You moved to Berlin around that time. What was the?
So sorry, I got it here. It's Selena Gomez.
Oh, Selena Gomez.
Selena Gomez.
Yeah.
I don't know how you call it.
Yeah, Selena Gomez, right? Yeah. They say Selena Gomez here. Yeah.
Okay,
right.
good.
But you're more correct. That's true. But anyway, that's pretty awesome. So, how do you position yourself to winning the bids for projects like Selena Gomez, or you've done stuff for like Washington Post and Vanity Fair, HarperCollins, Adobe and stuff like that. So how did you position yourself? And I would again, I'm going to take a strong guess that you were very strategic in how you made those opportunities happen. Can you tell us about how that came to be?
Yeah. So I always say that, and I'm very clear about this right now, much more than I was in the very beginning. This is something, that's why I try to speak about it often and like save some time for those that are newcomers in the, lettering or illustration industry, that I focus strongly in my skills. I try to, from the very beginning, I try to strive for great work, to produce a lot of work. So I was doing that from the very beginning, and I think that's really key when you're trying to establish yourself as a lettering artist or an illustrator. I think that, or as a branding agency, you need to put your work front and center. However, it is not all, right? And you also need to, I never had this this attitude of like, if you build it, they will come. I was just going after opportunities, right? So it wasn't like I was waiting for clients. I wasn't expecting clients to find my website. Mm-hmm. I was, just looking for their names, kind of choosing or handpicking the projects or the people I wanted to work with and contacting them directly, sending them promotional material or emails or cold calling. I did a couple of trips to New York to just have meetings with publishing houses and advertising agencies. I was very active into putting myself out there. I think it's also something I needed to train. I had to train myself in, because
it takes a certain skill set.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily had it. Yeah. I was also very, in the very beginning, I was also, I didn't know how to start a conversation. I didn't have these people skills that you feel or everyone thinks that they need to have in order to make connections with potential clients or people they could collaborate with. So I had to really train myself into, how do I start a conversation here? Yeah. How do I call their attention? How do I stay top of mind of my clients or in my clients or for my clients?
Yeah.
So I was very active towards that, and I always tell the story of, when I started my lettering business, I created a card, like a New Year's card, and I created a lettering for it, beautiful, and the card had like 3 blank spaces, and every space stood for different wishes. So those that received the card had to write down their wishes, like wish number 1, wish number 2, wish number 3. So wishes for the new year, right? And I sent this card to a lot of friends and colleagues and stuff, but I also sent it to people I wanted to work with. So, for instance, I sent it to my agent, the people I work with until the date. I sent it to my agents. And
were they your agents at that time?
No, they were not my agents. That's why I wanted to work with them. So in that card, instead of leaving the blank spaces, I just wrote my own wishes. And the wish number 1 was to travel the world. The wish number 2 was to be happy. And the wish number 3 was to work with you, right? And after they got this card, they sent me an email, and I've been working with them since then.
Wow.
Which is like over, 10 years now.
Wow.
And this card really brought me a lot of opportunities. I got my first speaking engagement through that card. I got also an assignment through that card. So, I think there's a lot of value in doing great work and making yourself visible, but you also need to go out there and look for the opportunities and not just stay still and wait for them.
Yeah. So it's in the creative world, as you well know, we have a challenge with a large part of our population being more on the introverted side.
Yes, I know.
How do you think people should work through that? Because I'm sure that there are incredibly talented, I shouldn't say, of course, there are incredibly talented creatives out there who really have a difficult time putting their, it could be either they're just insecure, they don't think they're good enough, or it's just not in their nature. So, I'm assuming you weren't quite like that, but I'm sure you had to reach some sort of threshold to getting more comfortable doing that because it wasn't something you were probably used to. But what do you say for people that are, a little bit more shy but they have incredible talent that you feel like they should be seen by millions of eyes?
Yeah. I mean, it's totally understandable, and it's natural that they have these insecurities around, how to talk to people if you're an introvert. And it's interesting because on my podcast, we have special episodes where I have conversations with people in my team. They are called coffee breaks. And recently we had a conversation with Elias, who is the senior designer in my studio. And he sees himself as an introvert, and he was asking me, like, how do you do that when you're an introvert? How do you, start conversations with people when you're an introvert? And I was telling to him that the fact that you are an extrovert doesn't mean that you are really connecting with people. I have seen so many people that are extroverts and cannot hold a conversation, are not capable of listening and understanding people's needs or how they can help someone. They're talking and talking all the time. So the fact that you're an introvert and you can talk doesn't necessarily mean that you can create a connection with someone and someone will remind you in the right way, because perhaps they will remind you because they cannot stand you. You have been talking the entire time that you have, met with that person, right? So I think that if you are an introvert, you don't necessarily need to think that that's something that's going to play against you. As long as you can train yourself to, start conversations, which you can totally train yourself.
Yeah.
There's prompts, things you can use, read books you can read about it. And it's just about starting those conversations, listen to what other people says, remember what other people says, and asking the right questions. But you don't necessarily need to be super outgoing or super outspoken to actually start a conversation with someone. So
that is I've asked that question a few times, and that's one of the best answers I've heard. I'm in a relationship with a very strong introvert. She's also very talented. She's great at her job. And her biggest value, and something that I think I probably learned a lot from her too, was she is really great with one-on-one conversations. She's better at it than me, I think, in a lot of ways. And that just really, I think, hits the nail on the head. I think that if you are an introvert, a lot of times you still love the connection. You may not want to be around a lot of noise with a lot of people for an extended period of time. But in my opinion, I think a lot of times introverts make the best friends because they're great listeners. They love to, have that one-on-one time. So you really get that personal connection like you're talking about. So that's I hadn't even really thought about it from that angle. That's really well said. So, I want to talk a little bit more about, your career in general now. So just a little bit, like, firstly, has your studio in general, how has it changed with the advent of COVID? Just out of curiosity, like, has it changed the dynamic very much? I mean, you're doing a lot of international stuff anyway, so you're doing a lot of Zoom calls, I would assume, mostly. But how has it changed for you guys?
Yeah, it has, and I think, because of COVID, I remember the day here in Germany, it was announced that there was a lockdown, the shutdowns, I remember because I had to drive my team with their computers to their places, and I came back to the studio, and I sat down on this table, like at this table where you see me right now, and I just cried. I thought, what do I do now? Like there were emails, and I, just by telling you, I remember, and it brings tears to my eyes. Like there were emails coming in of clients canceling projects or putting them on hold. So I actually sat down and said, like, well, what's next? What is that we are gonna do to keep on the show running? And gladly, throughout my career, we were talking about this in the very beginning, and thanks to my curiosity, I really opened up a lot of venues within my business. So my business is not based on just one thing. We don't only do client work, but we do a lot of different things. We create books, and we have an online shop. We started an online shop. I studied workshops and seminars, and I was teaching workshops in-house and in my studio. I had online classes. So there were a number of things we were doing. So during COVID, we really pivoted towards, like I remember that I opened my Excel sheet. I have an Excel sheet with all the income streams that I have in my studio. And this is something I share in my coaching programs. I show them how I keep track of all the income streams. And I opened that sheet of income streams. And I started to put a mark next to the things that were working and the things that brought me joy also. Like I was actually marking like, oh, this makes me really happy. This is draining me. This is bringing in money. Perhaps not making me super happy, but it's bringing in, financial return. And I kind of decided at that moment that we were doubling down on our teaching or our training. For a long time, a strong part of my business has been to teach other illustrators and artists to learn hand lettering and also to coach them in their business. But it was always something that we would do on the side, or it was like a side project, I would say. But I realized by looking at all my income stream that those perhaps 10 days a year that we were offering workshops or running our yearly seminar were bringing 30% of the income of our studio. So at that time, I said, like, hey, if we do that more, we could do something that we really enjoy, that we are really good at. People really want more of this. And we can, keep on running the studio. And this is what we did. We put all our trainings online. We were already building online trainings, but we took them online at that moment. And since then, we have been working heavily with students and with building our community and coaching lettering artists and illustrators. And we continue doing client work as well. This new direction that the studio has taken is so fulfilling. It makes me so happy. Aww. It allows me to work with a team and to hire other people, and it really creates an impact in my students. So that's a win-win situation for everyone.
Absolutely. And so you actually have, by the time this podcast comes out, it'll probably be right around the time when you're doing new registrations, right? Is that right? So you have talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we run a coaching program, a group coaching program for lettering artists and illustrators, and it's called Leap Now, and we are gonna open registration. We run it just once a year, so we take a limited group of members into the coaching program. So it's not a massive program. We really nurture our small group, and we take them through a journey of 4 months where we work intensively together. There's coaching calls, there's group meet or community meetings. There's a community platform. There's of course trainings. There's a retreat. There's a lot of things that we really do to help those that want to launch their business. We help them launch their business, but there's also already people that are already running their business or already started working as illustrators or lettering artists, and we help them take their business to new heights.
See, that I feel like that is huge, because I think that's still, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Argentina, and I don't know what it's like in Europe, but generally speaking, I think universities are still really like incredibly slow to train art students how to be business people.
Absolutely, and I think that also, especially our niche, artists and illustrators, we have heard for so long that it's extremely hard to make money with your art, that you won't do it as an artist, you won't make it as an artist. And I think we really need that extra push, that extra training, and that extra mindset change to take like a new position in the market and in the industry, and also change our own narrative, because it's not true anymore. It's not true anymore. We said in the very beginning of the podcast that you have so many venues to make a living as an artist or an illustrator nowadays. So there's no reason to think that you won't make it. And I think one of the reasons that I run the podcast and I invite other lettering artists and illustrators to come on the podcast is just to show also that there is people making it. And if they can make it, you can make it too.
That's exactly right.
So,
yeah, it's funny. I think it was early last week, I was on a double date, and the couple that we were hanging out with, they were talking about their teenage daughter, who was incredibly talented, very creative, very much involved in the theater arts, and even with sitting next to me, a designer who has a successful branding studio, still almost tried to allay my fears that, don't worry, she's really good at finance and engineering. Like, they still defaulted to, like, they were kind of like almost clutching their pearls. And so, there's a mindset there that still permeates through even people who have progressive family members. It's very strange. So I feel like I don't know how much you dive into it, but I think the fact that you're even having that conversation or lifting them up from that perspective is sort of a game changer. And I think the more that students in academies like this prove that it's like proof of concept, right? Oh, I'm an artist. The world has told me many years that you can't succeed as an artist, and you know what? And now I'm going to take these steps and taking classes and being a part of these coaching programs, like you're being a part of that you're lending assistance in, and then proving once again one more bubble in that boiling pot, proving that this is another successful independent artist who's making their way by themselves without having to be a part of some, drop their dreams and start moving for, working towards a pharmaceutical company. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think what you said is on point. I mean, there's I think a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of mindset and, building a new narrative around what an artist can do and be. And we do a lot of work around this in the program. But of course, there's all the other side, which has to do with, the frameworks and the techniques and the actual systems that you need to put in place to run a successful business, which is something that I personally learned by doing and by struggling. And like now, 10 years after, of course, in the middle, I discovered coaching and masterminds, and I've seen the impact that I had in my own business. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think now, other artists don't need to go through that process of trying to figure everything out on their own and struggling for many years to finally find their system or find a system. I think is just so rewarding for me. And I think it creates a great impact in the industry to provide this information and to help newcomers to to make it easier for newcomers.
Yeah, it sounds really amazing. And I think I just recently saw something you posted probably a few days ago about systems in general, like how to create efficiencies in your process, which I thought was really fascinating. Yeah. And I'm sure you'll probably be talking about that in the workshops as well too.
For sure. And I have to say that it's interesting because going back to what you said before, or what you asked me about, like how the business has changed thanks to the pandemic, I think that it's very interesting how the decision of keeping the financial decision of keeping the business running through doubling down on our trainings has become now part of our vision. It's no longer like a tactical strategy to keep the business running.
Yeah.
It's now something I really believe in.
Yeah.
And my vision in terms of what I want for the studio and for this business has changed thanks to that, because when you see also the response and the change that you can create through this coaching and training, or that we are creating in the academy through that, it's just mind-blowing. It's just, I want to do more of that.
That sounds amazing. So, as we start getting close to wrapping up our talk today, unfortunately it zipped by, I really would love for you to share how people can find out more about the academy. Can you tell us a little bit more about, the details of that, how they can find you and sign up and stuff?
So you can definitely find all the details about my academy's online trainings on martinaflor.com. You go to teaching and you will find all the details. You have also the opportunity to find about our coaching program on maketheleapnow.com. I'm going to give you the link so you can add it to the show notes.
Great.
If you like.
Perfect.
But there you can sign up for the waiting list. We will be launching or opening registrations at the end of June. And before that, we will be running a challenge of client outreach, which I was talking about today. It wasn't planned, but I was talking about today about this, this idea of not waiting for the opportunities to come to you, but going after them. So we are gonna run a challenge before we open registrations, just to help, everyone who wants to join have that first, land that first client through client outreach, through our framework. So they can definitely sign up for that, for the waiting list, and I will let them know when the challenge is on. Yes, so those are the places to find me. Also, Instagram is a great place to find me. I share a lot of content there. Is at martinaflor on Instagram.
Perfect.
And Twitter as well.
Beautiful. Oh, man, Martina, this was fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to come hang out with me for a little bit.
It was amazing, Mike. I love talking about all these topics.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully we'll be able to chat sometime in the near future, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen with this academy, and hopefully we're going to see a bunch of amazing new artists emerging out of there, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
You bet.
All right. Take care. All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Pencil Pushers Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at the Pencil Pushers Podcast for visual representation of our guest artwork, topics discussed, and anything else that contributes to the show. So be sure to subscribe, tell a friend, tell lots and lots of friends. Become a leadhead. And we're out.